Alright everybody, I'm Logan Alec, I'm a CPA, and today I want to talk to you about this new coalition called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, as well as some other organizations that are advocating for a universal basic income, also known as UBI. Now, I know most of you in my audience are familiar with UBI, but for those of you who aren't, just to catch you up, UBI, Universal Basic Income, is essentially a program in which governments pay a certain amount of money to all of its residents, or at least every adult resident. And the main difference between UBI and other forms of welfare like food stamps or unemployment is that UBI is distributed to everyone regardless of their financial situations. So there are no eligibility requirements other than just being alive. I mean, there could be some details that vary, right, depending on the plan. For example, do you pay children? Do you pay children as much as adults, or is it just a partial payment if you pay children at all? Are you going to include all permanent residents or just citizens? Things like that. But the basic idea behind UBI remains the same. You get the money, I get the money, even Jeff Bezos gets the money, okay? Hence the name Universal Basic Income, not Selective Basic Income or something like that. Now, a lot of people have immediate gut reactions to the UBI plan, and that's understandable. It's a very unconventional idea, and it goes against our intuition that government aid should target the people who need it the most, and also goes against some people's sense that people should have to work for their money and not just be giving handouts to the extent that they're an able-bodied adult. I'm not here to tell you whether you should or should not support a universal basic income. There are arguments in favor of it. There are also some good arguments against it, but I do want to explain the arguments behind it before moving on to covering this Mayors for Guaranteed Income coalition, which I'll talk about later on in the video. So, the universal basic income isn't exactly a new idea, but it gained a lot of visibility when Andrew Yang made it the focus of his 2020 campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. Obviously, Yang didn't end up winning the nomination, but he was able to spread that message and get more people talking about what had basically been a fringe position. His proposal for UBI, the Freedom Dividend, called for monthly payments of $1,000 to every adult citizen of the United States. Again, he didn't include children in his plan, but that's another idea that would have to be considered if this ever became a real possibility. And one caveat here is that people who are on benefits like welfare or food stamps would have the option to keep those benefits or switch to the UBI. So the checks wouldn't necessarily be coming alongside the other benefits, they would actually be replacing them. And this leads to one of the main arguments for universal basic income, which is that making the money available to everyone allows you to provide the same safety net without spending literally millions of dollars on a bureaucracy that's responsible for determining which people qualify for specific benefits. According to his website, Yang believes that a UBI would actually encourage people to look for work since, unlike unemployment insurance, it doesn't go away once you get a job. I think that's probably true for some people, but not as true for others. Regardless, in general, people would obviously be more financially secure and less dependent on their employers for income if they were receiving a consistent income from the government. This could also give, say, entrepreneurs more money to rely on in the early stages of growing a business, leading to more successful startups. Maybe. Right? Maybe. There's so many variables here. You can't really predict what life would be like if our entire country had a UBI. So there are some arguments to be made that a universal basic income could, stress on the word could, have a positive impact on the American working class and our economy in general. Of course, there are some good arguments against UBI. For one thing, implementing UBI would create a massive redistribution of wealth in the country that would very well rub against many people's notion of fairness. Some people say it could result in inflation, but the reality is that UBI likely wouldn't be paid for as much by the government simply printing new money as it would be by taking the existing money in certain people's pockets and putting it into many other people's pockets. Now, like I said, I'm not here to convince you one way or the other regarding UBI. I want to tell you about this coalition called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. This coalition was just created in June, and it's made up of 16 mayors from cities around the United States, including Los Angeles, Seattle, Atlanta, St. Paul, and Oakland. Again, the UBI isn't something that has actually been implemented on a large scale, but several of the mayors have been involved in UBI pilots in their own cities, and it's still a big development just to have major politicians calling for universal income in the United States. There have been a few smaller experiments both within the US and in some other countries, but we're still waiting on a full implementation to really see what this would look like in practice on a larger scale. One of the main experiments UBI advocates have been pointing to recently is the program run in Stockton, California by Michael Tubbs, the city's mayor and founder of this coalition, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. Other pilots are also taking place in Jackson, Chicago, Newark, and Atlanta, and I'm sure there will be more in the near future. As part of the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED, S-E-E-D, 125 citizens are receiving a debit card with $500 per month for 18 months. SEED is intended to act as a kind of trial run, giving researchers and policymakers the opportunity to see a universal basic income experiment in action. What is the effect on these individuals' lives? Does it really disincentivize them from working? What's the effect on their happiness? How does it change their lifestyle or spending habits? So these individuals' expenses are constantly being tracked in order to give us a better idea of what people would do with a universal basic income. And obviously, there's a big difference between running this program for 125 people versus scaling it up to an entire city or state or even nation. But again, these are just the first steps in figuring out what exactly would happen if we had a UBI at a larger scale. We're still pretty far off from UBI being implemented at the state or federal level, so there will probably be a few more of these pilot experiments as they continue to work out details and see if it's even a good idea at all. Funding, obviously, is one of the biggest challenges for these experiments, so most of the early tests have been funded by philanthropists. These are people who are willing to donate their money in order to promote a universal basic income and help to generate more data. Jack Dorsey, for example, the CEO of Twitter, donated $3 million to Mayors for a Guaranteed Income to fund upcoming projects. And in my opinion, these programs will continue to be dependent on wealthy donors for a while, or at least until taxpayers are willing to buy into the idea of universal basic income on a larger scale, which could possibly never happen. So that takes me to the question from the title of the video. Is this the first step? Is this Mayors for a Guaranteed Income the first step toward a UBI? Okay, and maybe it's not the first step, but it could be an important one when it comes to turning these ideas into a reality. Universal basic income plans have always popped up from time to time, but they've never had sustained support from mainstream politicians like we're seeing now. When this many mayors of some of the largest and most powerful cities in our country come together to take a look at UBI, to me that's a clear sign that, for better or for worse, universal basic income may not be a fringe idea for much longer. Now, I think this is a big development, but I don't want to overstate things. Do I think any state will create a universal basic income in the next 10 years? No, I don't. And it's hard to say whether this movement will keep catching on or whether it will die back down as it has in the past. So overall, I think we'll start to hear more about UBI over the next few years. I think we'll see more and more people seeing UBI as a less and less of a fringe idea and something that should be more mainstream. I mean, we've already seen household name Democratic politicians like Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders essentially proposing something like a UBI. I mean, their idea for the $2,000 a month stimulus, it wasn't technically UBI because it would still be limited based on income and other things, but hey, it's kind of like UBI, right? But honestly, we're still a long way off from the idea of universal basic income really taking hold in the United States at a national scale. And frankly, it may never take off in our lifetimes. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe Yang or someone sharing his ideas will win the presidency in 2032 or 2036 or something, and we have a federal universal basic income. But I think there's a pretty slim chance of that happening in the near future. All right, folks, just wanted to keep you all informed about this new coalition called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. In case you haven't heard about it, something to keep an eye on. Please let me know in the comments what you all think about UBI. Do you think it's a great idea that will help people get their lives on track who feel completely helpless? Or do you think it's a completely dumb idea that will reward laziness and disincentivize work? Or are you just not sure about the idea? Comment below, but please keep the discussion civil. We can disagree on things and still be friends, right? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.